Ma'am, step away from the counter. You don't belong in this hotel. Those were the first words Brent Hollister, general manager of the Monarch Grand in New York City, threw at Elena Carter before she could even finish saying her name. Conversations in the Grand Marble lobby stopped mid-sentence. A mother from Ohio froze with her luggage handle still in her hand. A businessman near the fireplace lifted his phone to record. And Elena, a black woman in a perfectly tailored navy suit, stood still under a chandelier that seemed suddenly far too bright. She wasn't loud. She wasn't confrontational. But Brent's voice cracked with something sharp, something ugly. "Security is on its way," he snapped. "Do not make this harder." Those first 100 words set the stage for a moment no one there would ever forget. Elena had arrived with nothing more dramatic in mind than checking into the Hudson presidential suite she'd reserved 6 days earlier. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of mild New York day when tourists strolled through Central Park and the city moved with its usual confident rhythm. But inside, the Monarch Grand, that rhythm broke the second Brent noticed who was approaching his desk. His smile thinned, his shoulders stiffened, and he leaned forward like he was bracing for trouble. "I'm here to check in," Elena said calmly. "Carter. Elena Carter." Brent didn't touch the keyboard. Instead, he stared at her, like the name itself was suspicious. "We don't hand out luxury suites to just anyone," he said. "Identification, credit card. And don't hand me anything that doesn't match your profile." "My profile?" Elena asked. "All I'm saying," Brent replied, voice low enough to sting, "is that this suite is $1,500 a night. People in certain lines of work sometimes try to sneak in pretending they belong." A man standing behind Elena muttered, "Jesus Christ." Another whispered, "Is he serious?" Elena kept her posture steady. Her mother had always taught her that dignity is a habit, not a performance. She slid her driver's license and American Express card across the marble counter. Brent picked them up with the tips of his fingers as though touching them might somehow confirm his fears. He examined the card so long it became uncomfortable. "You from Atlanta?" he asked. "Yes." "Long way from home," he said. "And this Amex, is this even yours?" That did it. A retired schoolteacher from Texas stepped forward, voice trembling with disbelief. "Sir, she gave you valid ID. Stop treating her like that." Brent turned on her. "Ma'am, this is between me and the guest." "Guest," Eleanor repeated softly. "Interesting choice of word, considering you haven't treated me like one." Brent ignored the comment. He grabbed the desk phone, pressed a few buttons with theatrical emphasis, and spoke into the receiver, even though the line wasn't open. "Front desk requesting verification on a suspicious reservation. Possible fraudulent payment method. Please expedite." A collective gasp moved through the lobby, the kind that rises when people recognize injustice unfolding in real time. "You're making a mistake," Elena said. "We'll see," Brent answered. 2 security officers arrived. One officer, Lane, a middle-aged black man with tired eyes, took in the scene with a look that said he'd witnessed this pattern far too many times. The other, younger and eager, stood behind Brent, like backup in a crime drama. "Escort her to the back room," Brent ordered, "until we sort out whether she belongs here." Sir Officer Lane said carefully, "Has she done anything threatening?" Brent scoffed. "Her behavior doesn't match the profile of a guest in our Hudson suite. That's enough." Lane looked at Elena. Something in his expression seemed to apologize for sins he didn't commit. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." The murmur in the lobby grew louder. Phones were recording openly now. Elena nodded once. She had nothing to hide and far more power than anyone in that room understood. As the officers led her past the velvet rope and down a narrow hallway, Brent followed close behind, smirking like he had already won something. Inside the small staff office, Brent shut the door with a click that echoed louder than it should. The room smelled of old coffee and paperwork. He folded his arms, leaned against the desk, and studied her like a suspect. "Let's cut to the truth," he said. "What are you really doing here? Meeting someone looking for an upgrade? Running a scam?" "None of those." Elena answered, her voice steady. "I booked a room. I expect to check in." "You expect too much," he said. "And I don't believe this card belongs to you." She inhaled slowly, then reached down and lifted her black leather briefcase onto the desk. Brent tensed, as if she might pull out something dangerous. "You wanted verification," Elena said quietly. "Here it is." She opened the case, took out a thick folder, and slid it toward him. Brent frowned. He opened it. His eyes skimmed the first page, then widened, then drained of color. "No," he whispered. This isn't real." "It's very real," Elena replied. "And you probably should have read the emails your corporate office sent last week." Brent's hands shook. He looked from the contract to Elena, as if trying to reconcile two realities at once. "You," he stammered. "You can't be." "I can't be what Elena asked." "The owner of the Monarch Grand." His knees buckled. Officer Lane grabbed his arm just in time. The younger guard stepped back, stunned. Elena closed her briefcase gently. "Now that you've called security on your new employer," she said, "shall we talk about what happens next?" The lobby outside had no idea that the moment they were all watching was only the beginning. For most people in that lobby, Elena Carter was simply the woman who stood her ground with remarkable composure while being publicly profiled. They saw her steady gaze, the way she refused to shrink, the unshakable calm that made even seasoned security officers hesitate. But what they didn't see, what no one could have guessed from her elegant posture and controlled breathing, was the long, uneven road that had shaped that calm. Elena's quiet strength wasn't natural born. It was earned, carved through experiences that left marks she never forgot. She grew up in Southwest Atlanta, raised by a mother who worked 2 nursing shifts and still managed to make pot roast every Sunday. Her father was gone by the time she was 8, leaving behind an old blue Buick and a handful of lessons about standing tall even when no one else believed in you. Life was not always gentle with her, but she learned early that dignity was something you practice even when the world tries to knock it out of you. She was the girl teachers loved for her discipline, the teenager who worked at the grocery store on weekends, the young woman who dreamed of something bigger than the zip code printed on her mail. Elena had her daughter Maya at 22. That changed everything. She pressed pause on her plans, took a job as a hotel housekeeper while slowly working toward her bachelor's degree at night. She remembered pushing her cleaning cart through the hallways of a grand Atlanta conference hotel, watching executives stride past her with polished shoes and confident smiles. Some offered polite nods. Others looked through her as if she were part of the decor. A few assumed she spoke limited English and tossed used towels at her feet. Those weren't moments of outrage. They were moments of clarity. Moments that taught her exactly what the hospitality industry needed and what it lacked. But the turning point came years later, when she stood outside the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business, holding her acceptance letter and feeling both terrified and unstoppable. She entered her MBA program as a single mother in her late 20s, the oldest in some classes, the only black woman in others. Some classmates welcomed her. Others talked over her ideas or dismissed her observations with polite condescension. But Elena had no intention of wilting. She had Maya watching. She had a future to build. And she had something many of her peers didn't real-world experience with the people who made hotels run. Her mentor, Marilyn Scott, entered her life during her second year at Ross. Marilyn, a veteran in the hospitality field, with a laugh you could hear across a ballroom, became both guide and friend. But she also became something more, an interpreter of the unspoken rules. "Listen to me," Marilyn had said one night over late coffee. "You can't change the culture of an industry by giving speeches about it. You change it when you own the building, when you sign the checks, when your name is on the deed." Elena hadn't realized then how deeply that sentence would root itself into her future. Her career took off slowly then, all at once. After graduation, she joined a boutique hospitality firm as a consultant, working her way from small assignments to complex turnaround projects. Employers noticed her talent for walking into distressed properties and leaving them stronger financially and culturally. It wasn't charm. It was discipline, empathy, and a clear vision that frontline workers deserved respect as much as CEOs did. But along every step of that rise, she continued to run into walls she knew too well. At a conference in Miami, she had arrived early to set up a presentation, only to be mistaken for catering staff by a vendor who asked, "Can you grab more glasses from the back?" During a board meeting in Denver, a visiting executive assumed she was the assistant. At a hotel in Phoenix, she had been asked twice for her room number just to confirm she belonged on the concierge floor. They were small cuts, never enough to scandalize the news, but enough to remind her of the gap she had dedicated her life to narrowing. And then there was Maya. Her daughter, by then a thoughtful teenager, once asked her mom, "Why do people look at us like we don't fit where we are?" That question hit Elena deeper than any slight, any remark, any raised eyebrow she had encountered. Because behind the calm she wore every day was a fire she rarely let people see, a fire fueled by years of watching the world measure her before she ever spoke. The idea of buying a hotel, a historic, iconic one in the heart of New York, seemed outlandish to most people. But to Elena, it was the logical next step. Owning the Monarch Grand wasn't about status. It wasn't even about the property's potential for profit, although the location near Central Park made it a financial gem waiting for the right renovation. What drove her was something far deeper. She wanted to own a place where people of color wouldn't have to justify their presence through wardrobe, wallet, or tone of voice. A place where dignity wasn't conditional. When she began researching the Monarch Grand, she discovered exactly why the opportunity existed. The hotel had suffered years of mismanagement, high turnover, and quiet complaints not loud enough to make headlines, but consistent enough to raise alarms for someone who knew the patterns. 14 documented guest grievances in 2 years. Comments from staff about inconsistent treatment. A culture that looked polished from the outside, but cracked behind closed doors. Elena didn't just see risk. She saw a challenge worthy of her experience. She saw a chance to set a new standard. What she didn't know, at least not then, was how deep the roots of the problem went. In the weeks leading up to the purchase, she quietly visited the hotel, dressed like any other business traveler, observing the staff, the service patterns, and the unspoken dynamics. She noticed who was greeted warmly and who wasn't, who received prompt service and who waited. She noticed that her own presence made a few employees straighten up, and not in a welcoming way. It didn't surprise her. It fueled her. So when she finally signed the acquisition contract, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt responsible. Responsible for repairing the fractures, protecting the staff who wanted better, confronting the ones who stood in the way, and proving to every young person of color, especially Maya, that leadership in this industry didn't have to fit one mold. That was the woman standing in the lobby hours earlier, the woman Brent Hollister couldn't read, couldn't place, and couldn't imagine holding authority. That was the woman he dismissed, the woman he underestimated, the woman he tried to humiliate. And that was the woman who handed him a purchase contract that shook the foundation beneath his feet. Her calm wasn't the absence of fear or anger. It was the result of a lifetime learning when to speak, when to stand still, and when to let the truth land with its own undeniable weight. Elena Carter didn't need to raise her voice. Her life story had already taught her how to be heard. The small staff office smelled of burned coffee and old printer ink, a cramped space that suddenly felt too tight for the 3 people inside it. Officer Lane stood near the door, watching with a tired heaviness in his eyes. The younger guard hovered behind him, unsure whether to stay alert or step back. And at the center of it all, Brent Hollister clung to the edge of the desk like the room itself was tilting. He kept flipping between the contract in his shaking hands and Elena Carter's calm face. Sweat collected at his temples. He blinked hard, as if the words on the paper might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. I don't understand, he whispered. You don't have to understand. Elena said, her tone steady, but not cruel. You just have to acknowledge what's in front of you. Brent swallowed. This can't be real. It's very real, Elena replied. And you would have known it if you'd read the corporate briefings your staff received last week. Officer Lane cleared his throat, the only sound cutting through the tension. He wasn't the kind of man who enjoyed seeing anyone fall apart, not even someone who had just profiled a guest in front of half the lobby. But Elena didn't look away. She wasn't here for his comfort. She was here for truth. Brent sank into the chair behind him, breathing hard. You can't hold me responsible, he said, voice breaking. I was following protocol. What protocol? Elena asked. He hesitated, then pulled a worn binder from the drawer. He slid it across the desk, its edges frayed from years of use. On the cover was a label written in block letters, Guest Verification Guidelines. Elena opened it and scanned through the photocopied pages. She recognized the language vague enough to deny intent, precise enough to justify anything. But then she landed on Section 4, a block of text highlighted in yellow, profile inconsistencies. Guests presenting as financially overstated based on visual evaluation. Indicators include attire accessories, body language, and confidence markers. Her pulse thinned to a low, steady beat. She looked up at Brent. So this, she said, tapping the line with her finger, was your justification to call security. It's what we were trained to do, he said. Corporate pushed us to crack down on questionable reservations. Questionable, Elena repeated. Meaning what? Meaning who Brent didn't answer. He didn't have to. The binder had said it for him. For years, Elena had suspected that discrimination in hospitality wasn't just occasional misconduct, it was quietly institutionalized. But seeing the policy in black and white tucked inside the desk of her own property made her stomach twist. She wasn't just fighting a single manager. She was confronting a system that had survived precisely because it hid behind polite language. Before she could respond, a soft knock came at the door. Officer Lane opened it, and a nervous young man stepped inside. He looked barely 30 eyes darting between Elena and Brent. "Ms. Carter?" he asked cautiously. "Yes. I'm Diego, night auditor. I think you should see something." Lane stepped aside as Diego set a thick manila envelope on the desk. Inside were memos, screenshots, and printed emails. He spoke quickly, like someone who'd rehearsed this moment, but wasn't sure he'd get through it. "I've been documenting things for a while," he said. "What happened in the lobby today? It wasn't new. It wasn't even unusual." Brent stiffened. "You little." Elena held up a hand. "Let him speak." Diego nodded gratefully. "Look, I grew up around people who got treated like this all the time. At first, I thought it was just Brent being well Brent. But then I started noticing patterns. People of color waiting longer at check-in. Staff being told to ask extra questions if someone's presentation felt inconsistent. And last fall," he paused. "Last fall, we got a memo from corporate." Elena's eyes narrowed. What memo? He handed her a document labeled Visual Wealth Indicators Protocol. The name alone made her chest tighten. She opened it. This one wasn't vague. It wasn't subtle. It read like someone had taken every biased instinct and turned it into bullet points. Evaluate quality of guests' clothing brands. Note jewelry, authenticity, and condition. Assess posture, eye contact, verbal confidence. Trigger secondary verification if discrepancies appear. Delay check-in until management approval. Her shoulders lowered with a slow, exhausted breath. "Who approved this corporate legal?" Diego said. "And the VP of operations." Brent tried to defend himself. "Everyone used it. Every manager at every property. You can't put this all on me." "But you chose to weaponize it," Elena replied, "and you did so without hesitation." Officer Lane looked away, jaw tight. He had likely seen similar policies in other hotels throughout his career. Maybe he had enforced them. Maybe he hated himself for that. But today, standing inside a room where the owner herself had been treated as an intruder, something in him shifted. Diego continued, voice steadier now. "There's more. Guest complaints, staff testimonies. I didn't know who to trust with them. But after what happened today, I knew." He pulled out another sheet, handwritten, signed by multiple staff members. "Selective guest treatment is real. We've raised concerns. Nothing changes. We want better." Elena felt the weight of every word. She had come here prepared to fix a broken culture. What she hadn't realized was how deeply the cracks ran. "Thank you," she told Diego. "This took courage. I just want to work in a place where doing the right thing doesn't cost you your job," he said quietly. She nodded, closing the file. "You will. I promise." Brent stared at her anger and fear fighting inside him. "You can't expose all this. It'll destroy us." "No," Elena answered. "It will finally make us honest." The room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that follows truth too large to ignore. Elena had walked into this hotel expecting resistance, but she hadn't expected to find a blueprint for discrimination buried inside a binder. She hadn't expected a whistleblower to walk into the office minutes after she revealed ownership. And she certainly hadn't expected to become the catalyst for unraveling an entire system. But now, the path was clear. This wasn't just about a humiliating moment in the lobby. This was about dismantling the machinery that made that moment possible. A single manager hadn't created this problem. A culture had. A corporation had. Years of silence had. And Elena Carter was done with silence. She looked at the folder one more time, at the signatures of the staff who had trusted her enough to speak up. Then she closed it with a quiet firmness that felt like the beginning of something bigger than any scandal. "We're not sweeping this away," she said. "We're exposing it." And in that moment, everyone in the room understood that the hotel wasn't the only thing changing. The entire system was about to face a reckoning. The fallout began before the sun even rose the next morning. By 6 a.m., news outlets were already replaying the lobby footage, Brent calling security, Elena standing silently with her briefcase, the look on his face when he realized who she was. It spread through social media like wildfire, shared, debated, twisted, applauded. And with that attention came the pushback, sharp and immediate. Corporate struck first. Philip Grant, the CEO of the former ownership group, went on a morning business show, claiming Elena had orchestrated a dramatic scene to promote herself. He spoke with the polished cadence of a man who'd spent his career dodging responsibility. "Our staff followed procedure," he insisted. "This incident seems manufactured." Elena watched the clip on her phone, jaw tightening. Manufactured. That was the word powerful people used when the truth became inconvenient. Within hours, the hotel's PR inbox was filled with messages, some supportive, others dripping with hostility. "Go back to Atlanta," one read. "You're ruining a historic property." Another said, "You people always play the race card." Threatening emails trickled into her personal account, her phone buzzing nonstop. She blocked numbers, deleted messages, but the ugliness clung to her like smoke. By noon, the hotel's reservations manager came to her office looking pale. "We've had 60 cancellations in the last 4 hours," she said. 2 major corporate clients suspended their contracts until the situation settles. A conference scheduled for the following month backed out entirely. Financial projections slid across Elena's desk with red numbers she didn't need a calculator to understand. The crisis was real, and it was tightening like a vice. Then came the meeting request from Richard Keller, the investor who had put money into the acquisition. He arrived in a tailored gray suit, frowning before he even took his seat. "We need to talk," he announced. "This situation is snowballing out of control. Bookings are down. Media pressure is rising. If you don't resolve this quietly, I'll withdraw my investment." Elena kept her voice steady. "Resolve it how settled privately," he said. "Release a statement saying it was a misunderstanding. Reinstate the manager with training. Don't challenge the corporation. Without a public fight, this goes away." "So you want me to protect them," she said. "Not the people they harmed." "I want to protect the business," Richard snapped. "These moral crusades cost money. And frankly, you're becoming a liability." Elena sat back, a cold stillness settling over her. Liability. A word she'd heard before. A word society liked to use when a black woman refused to shrink. Richard stood. "Fix this, or I'm gone by the 10th. When he left, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. That evening, as dusk dimmed the skyline beyond her office window, Elena finally drove home to her apartment near Columbus Circle. She found Maya waiting on the couch with her homework spread out and the TV on low volume, replaying clips of the hotel incident. "Mom," Maya said softly, "are you going to be okay?" Elena forced a smile, though her chest ached with exhaustion. I'm fine. You don't look fine. Elena sat beside her daughter, feeling the weight she had kept off her shoulders all day settle heavily across her back. This is hard, she admitted. But sometimes, doing the right thing comes with a cost. Maya leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. They're being awful to you. They're scared, Elena said. Scared of what happens when someone pushes back. Later that night, long after Maya had gone to bed, Elena sat alone at the kitchen table with her laptop open, scrolling through reports she didn't want to read, cancellation records, projected revenue losses, emails from attorneys, warning of corporate retaliation. Her eyes burned and her hands trembled. She had fought many battles in her life, but this one felt bigger and lonelier than all the rest. For the first time, she wondered if she'd made a mistake. If she was risking everything she'd built for a fight she couldn't win. The doubt seeped in quietly, whispering beneath the hum of the refrigerator. She imagined losing the hotel, the investors, her reputation. She imagined Maya watching her mother fail publicly on a national stage. It was nearly midnight when her phone buzzed with a call from Marilyn Scott. The sound alone steadied Elena's breath. You're thinking about quitting, Marilyn said, without preamble. Elena closed her eyes. It feels like I'm being crushed from every direction. That's how you know you're hitting the right nerve, Marilyn replied. You're threatening a system that's been comfortable for decades. They're supposed to push back. I'm tired, Marilyn. Of course you are. But let me tell you something I learned a long time ago. When you fight a machine, it doesn't fight fair. It tries to wear you out until you choose silence. That's how corruption survives, not by strength, but by exhaustion. Elena didn't respond. She stared at the glowing screen in front of her. The memo, the complaints, the signatures of staff who had asked her quietly, bravely to help them. You have something they never expected, Marilyn said. Ownership. And once you own something, you own the responsibility to change it. The question is simple. Are you willing to stand alone long enough for others to stand with you? Elena looked toward Maya's bedroom door, then to the folder of evidence on her table. She thought of Diego's trembling voice, Officer Lane's weary eyes, the staff who had dared to speak up, and every moment in her life when someone decided she didn't belong. Her doubt began to shift slowly, but unmistakably, into resolve. No, she said at last, her voice steadying. I'm not quitting. Good, Marilyn whispered. Because the fight doesn't start when the world applauds you. It starts when you have every reason to walk away. And don't. Elena closed her laptop, took a long breath, and felt something settle deep inside her, a decision firm and immovable. If they wanted a fight, they would get one. She wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The article dropped just after sunrise. Not a rumor, not a whisper. An explosive, meticulously sourced investigation that laid everything out in black and white. A nationally respected journalist, Mark Donnelly, published a feature titled The Quiet Architecture of Discrimination in America's Luxury Hotels. And at the center of it sat the monarch Grand Brent Hollister and the corporate policies that had quietly shaped the experiences of countless guests long before Elena Carter purchased the property. By 7 a.m., Elena's phone began vibrating nonstop. Not with threats this time, but with messages from former hotel employees, travelers, civil rights groups, pastors, professors, and everyday people who had their own stories about being treated like intruders in places they had paid to be. Some messages were brief. Thank you for exposing this. while others poured out pages of memories, frustration, and a longing for change. News outlets scrambled to cover the story. Morning shows ran segments. Opinion writers weighed in. Activists amplified it. Travelers began posting their own videos and testimonies naming hotels across the country where they'd been profiled or questioned. A national conversation ignited cross-state lines and grew louder by the hour. Something had shifted. People weren't whispering anymore. By noon, the corporate board behind the old management called an emergency meeting. The stock price dipped sharply. Investors demanded explanations. Legal teams scrambled. And then in a moment, as surreal as it was overdue, the board announced that CEO Philip Grant and VP of Operations were transitioning out effective immediately. It was corporate language for being pushed out the door, but the meaning was unmistakable. Accountability, long delayed, had finally clawed its way into the boardroom. But the most striking shift came from inside the Monarch Grand itself. Staff members who had once remained silent began stepping forward, some publicly, others privately, to share what they had endured. Cleaning staff described being instructed to keep an eye on certain types of guests. Front desk clerks detailed pressure to apply the wealth indicators policy. A concierge who'd worked at the hotel for 16 years said he'd felt ashamed of the way certain guests were treated, but feared retaliation if he spoke. Elena met with each of them. She listened. She took notes. She apologized on behalf of a building that had never until now taken responsibility. But she also saw something remarkable hope. People who had been dismissed or ignored were suddenly realizing they weren't alone. Their experiences weren't isolated. They were part of a pattern, one that was now unraveling in public view. 2 days after the article ran, Elena held a press conference in the hotel's grand lobby, standing under the same chandelier where Brent had humiliated her. Reporters crowded the space. Cameras flashed. And for the first time, Elena addressed the nation directly. Discrimination doesn't survive because people are hateful, she said. It survives because institutions protect it. It survives because too many people stay quiet. But silence ends here, not just for this hotel, but for every place that believes selective dignity is acceptable. She announced sweeping policy changes, anonymous reporting channels, mandatory equity and bias training, third-party oversight, transparent complaint records, and uniform verification procedures for all guests, every identity checked the same way, no matter their race, clothing, or zip code. She explained that the Monarch Grand would serve not only as a hotel, but as a model for a different kind of hospitality, one where inclusion wasn't a slogan, but a standard. Then she paused and said something that rippled across the room. No one should have to own the building to be treated like they belong in it. The reporters fell silent. Some nodded. Others typed furiously. A few in the crowd felt their breath catch, not because the line was dramatic, but because it was true, in a way they could feel, down to their bones. After the conference, Officer Lane approached her privately. The lines on his face seemed softer. "I've worked in security for 25 years, he told her. Seen a lot of things I'm not proud of. But what you're doing here, it matters. You're changing something most people think can't change." Diego followed next, looking more confident than she had ever seen him. "Staff are talking," he said. "Not scared anymore. They feel like this place can be different." The transformation didn't happen overnight. Some guests canceled their reservations, claiming the hotel had become too political. A few employees resigned unable or unwilling to adjust to the new expectations. But for every departure, there was someone else, a frontline worker, who finally felt respected, a guest who booked because they believed in the mission, a community member who sent a handwritten note thanking Elena for her courage. Maya watched her mother navigate it all, pride radiating from her like a second skin. One evening, she approached Elena in the suite where they sometimes stayed during renovations. "Mom," she said softly, "does it feel worth it now?" Elena looked out at the lights of New York, stretching across the night like a promise. "Yes," she answered, "because change doesn't start when things are easy. It starts when the truth makes people uncomfortable." As weeks passed, something remarkable took shape. The Monarch Grand, once a place defined by silent bias, became known as a symbol of what accountability could look like. Workshops were held in its conference rooms. Universities requested case studies. Tourism groups reached out to adopt its policies. The hotel's new reputation, forged through turmoil, became a beacon for an industry that had long needed reform. And Elena, standing in the same lobby where everything began, felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel. A beginning. Not just for her. Not just for the hotel. But for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. She knew the work would continue. She knew challenges would come. But she also knew something else, something steady and unshakable. Change wasn't a moment. It was a movement. And she was finally standing exactly where she was meant to be. Elena Carter's story began with a moment that should have been ordinary, a simple check-in at a hotel she owned. Instead, it unraveled a deeply rooted system of discrimination, exposed the quiet cruelty hidden behind polished counters, and forced an entire industry to confront truths it had avoided for far too long. What happened in that lobby was not an isolated incident. It was a spark igniting conversations that had waited decades to be heard. Elena did not ask to become the center of a national reckoning. But when the moment arrived, she refused to step aside. She faced humiliation, hostility, financial loss, and personal attacks. Yet she chose to stand firm, not because she sought attention, but because she saw what others couldn't, a chance to break a cycle that had harmed countless people before her. Her courage revealed the structural flaws embedded within hospitality flaws, masked as protocol verification or professional instinct. Through evidence testimony and undeniable lived experience, she showed that discrimination wasn't an occasional misstep. It was a system protected by silence. And by breaking that silence, she became a catalyst for change that rippled far beyond the walls of the Monarch Grand. Corporate executives who had long benefited from outdated policies were forced out. Staff members who had felt powerless finally spoke up. New standards were established not to polish the hotel's image, but to redefine what fairness and dignity should look like in every place that welcomes the public. But the heart of Elena's journey wasn't the lawsuit, the headlines, or the press conferences. It was the steady, unwavering belief that no person, regardless of color, income, background, or appearance, should ever feel like a stranger in a place they have every right to be. Her calm in the face of injustice was not passive. It was the product of years of resilient sacrifice and a refusal to let others decide her worth. And through that calm, she showed us what strength truly looks like, not loud, not angry, but deeply committed to what is right. The lesson her story leaves us with is simple but powerful. When you witness injustice, whether in a workplace, a community, or a simple interaction, your silence strengthens the system that created it. Courage doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like documentation persistence and the willingness to speak when your voice trembles. And change doesn't require owning a building. It requires owning your truth. Each of us has the ability to challenge harm, support fairness, and create spaces where every human being feels seen, respected, and valued. If Elena's story moved, inspired you, or reminded you that dignity is non-negotiable, don't let the message stop here. Support stories that shine light on truth. Stand with voices that demand better. And if you believe these stories matter, if you want to see more powerful narratives like this, hit that subscribe button and help this channel keep bringing them to life. Your support fuels the next video.